So, thank you. Thank you all for joining. We're going to be covering compliance through investment criteria, and the material presented today only applies to Tier 1 buildings. And again, if you didn't hear me in the introduction, my name is Brittany Wagner. I am part of the Clean Buildings Unit. So a few reminders before we start. Please mute yourself during the presentation. If you have any questions, utilize the chat box. We will try to address questions at the end and also address the ones that were emailed in before today. This presentation is recorded, and if you registered for this presentation, we will email you a link to rewatch it along with the question and answers and any links that are helpful. So many of you are familiar with commerce. Those of you who are not, this slide represents what we do. We touch almost every aspect of community and economic development in Washington State. We work with local governments, business, and civic leaders to strengthen communities so all residents may thrive and prosper. Among this work is the implementation of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. The agenda for today. We will start out by giving a brief overview of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard. But if you go to our website, there are extensive resources, some of which we will be sharing in the email after the presentation. We will be discussing the various compliance pathways, but mostly focusing on compliance through investment criteria. We will give a broad overview of the ASHRAE Level 2 Energy Audit and Life Cycle Cost Analysis tool as it relates to this compliance pathway. We'll share some of the resources pertaining to this pathway, along with emailing them after. Hopefully at the end of this presentation, with 90 minutes, we should have time. We'll do some question and answer. And then throughout the presentation, we'll have a couple questions for kind of check on learning to promote more engagement and ensure the content is clear to the audience. All right, the Clean Buildings Law was authorized in House Bill 1257 in the 2019 legislative session. The law requires covered commercial buildings over 50,000 gross square feet to meet energy performance targets. Commerce has developed amendments to ASHRAE Standard 100 to conform with the Clean Buildings legislation, and these amendments can be found under WAC 194-50. We also offer an incentive program for early adopters. The incentive funds are limited to $75 million, so please see the program page for eligibility requirements. Earlier, we referenced Tier 1 buildings. So the Clean Buildings Performance Standard applies to Tier 1 buildings, formerly known as covered commercial buildings. A Tier 1 building is where the sum of non-residential hotel, motel, and dormitory floor areas exceeds 50,000 gross square feet, excluding the parking garage. So that's what we'll be focusing on, and throughout this presentation is Tier 1 buildings. If you've attended some of our recent presentations, like the last one on meeting the EUIT, you are familiar with some of these introductory slides. The owner of a Tier 1 building must meet the following reporting schedule for complying with the standard and every 5 years thereafter. So you can see that the compliance dates start in June 1st, 2026 for the largest buildings, and subsequently after that. And we want to emphasize, we highly recommend you start now. This is a process-oriented standard with long lead times and to help keep compliance costs down. It is most cost-effective to start the compliance process early. So this is a breakdown of the Clean Buildings Performance Standard by section, comprised of ASHRAE Standard 100 and amendments, again in WAC 194-50. The integrated version of the standard can be downloaded through the Clean Buildings website. Some of the sections you can see here are bolded, and those are the ones that are applicable to this webinar. All right, I'll give you guys a second to look at this graphic. If you've seen the other webinars, you've seen this one before, but it highlights the 3 potential ways that Tier 1 buildings can comply with the performance standard. So the first one you can see is determine if the building is eligible for compliance through exemption. If the building is not eligible for compliance through exemption, you can pursue compliance through meeting the energy use intensity target or EUIT. The third option is compliance through investment criteria performance metric. This path is used when the EUI is immeasurable, there is not an energy use intensity target, or the energy use intensity target cannot be met. Again, that is what we are going to be focusing on today, the investment criteria path. Okay, so how do you know which path to take? We kind of just mentioned this in the last slide, but some of the questions to ask are, does the building qualify for an exemption? You can review the list of exemptions found in section Z 4.1 of the standard. Is the energy use intensity measurable? For example, a building that shares a meter with other buildings will not have a measurable EUI, energy use intensity. Is there a target for the building? For example, data centers do not have a target. So a building that has over 50% gross square feet as a data center would have to pursue the investment criteria pathway. And then if you can measure the EUIT, can the building meet the target through cost-effective measures? If not, again, you would pursue the investment criteria path. So you're pursuing the investment criteria path. Now what? Compliance is a chronological process. And here's an overview of the steps for compliance through investment criteria. And we'll go into more detail about each, starting with conducting an ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit. So first, a qualified energy auditor shall conduct an ASHRAE Level 2 energy audit, identifying all energy efficiency measures in accordance with Section 8 of the standard. A qualified energy auditor is a person having training, experience, and 3 years of professional experience in building energy use analysis and any of the credentials listed in this slide. So a licensed professional architect or engineer in the in the jurisdiction where the project is located, a person with building operator certification level 2 by the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council, a certified commissioning professional, a qualified energy auditor, a certified energy manager in current standing certified by the Association of the Energy Engineers, and an energy management professional certified by the Energy Management Association. And you can find more information online and help identify listed qualified energy auditors. So Form D is the required energy audit documentation that we require. It is a Washington specific report within the audit template from the Department of Energy's Energy Asset Score tool. And it can be found on the DOE website, which we will provide a link to later. So to give you a visual of what the Department of Energy audit template looks like, you can see there's multiple tabs at the top. You need to make sure that you click on the audit template highlighted in yellow on this screen. You will have to get into this screen, you'll have to create an account. And then if you look over on the far right side, you'll see the report type. Please be sure to select from the drop-down menu, Washington Commerce Clean Buildings Form D report. And this is an example of what a test building audit looks like. So once you've completed and put in all your building's information, you will get a PDF version, and that will be uploaded into the portal. So simple payback. Energy efficiency measures identified by the level 2 energy audit that do not pay for themselves over the life of the measure and have a simple payback greater than the measure life may be omitted from implementation and the life cycle cost analysis and excluded from further consideration. At the bottom of the screen, I just put a really simple formula. The initial cost of the energy efficiency measure divided by cost savings equals the simple payback. All right. So the next step when pursuing compliance through the investment criteria is the life cycle cost analysis tool. This identifies the cost-effective measures and must be completed in accordance with Annex X. The life cycle cost analysis, also known as Form F, is an extensive spreadsheet that compares the base case of the existing building to the alternative case to evaluate cost effectiveness of energy efficiency measures proposed by the ASHRAE Level 2 Energy Audit. The tool uses the results of the energy audit to identify the optimized bundle of energy efficiency measures, which is the collection of energy efficiency measures identified that maximizes the energy savings and still results with a savings to investment ratio, or SIR, greater than 1. Individual measures that do not meet the life cycle cost test may be excluded from the implementation plan if they are not integral to the implementation of other cost-effective measures in the bundle. These energy savings are cost-effective as evaluated by the life cycle cost analysis tool in accordance with the investment criteria of normative Annex X. In summary, a bundle of measures is optimized by including the maximum number of energy efficiency measures within the bundle while still meeting cost effectiveness criteria, and may include energy efficiency measures that, when evaluated on their own, may not be deemed cost effective, but evaluated within the bundle, it remains cost effective. So Form F, the life cycle cost analysis tool, is updated annually, and it needs to be submitted to Commerce with the other required compliance forms if you are pursuing the investment criteria of the standard. And there is an entire separate webinar and training that we have posted on the life cycle cost analysis that goes into more detail. All right, so our first check on learning is Form F a requirement of the investment criteria? You can just type your answers in the chat. Let me know what we're getting if you don't mind.
Oh, we've got one yes.
Okay.
2 yes.
Okay.
Oh, it looks like it's a common thing. Yes.
Yes. If you are pursuing compliance or investment criteria, you must complete the life cycle cost analysis, aka Form F. So good job. All right, moving on. The next step in the process is to implement all cost-effective energy efficiency measures from the identified optimized bundle. So implement optimized bundle of energy efficiency measures in accordance with Section 9 of the standard. Individual energy efficiency measures that do not meet the life cycle cost analysis test may be excluded from implementation unless they are integral to other cost-effective measures. Building owners may delay the implementation of cost-effective equipment or system energy efficiency measures through phased implementation when the systems or equipment identified are not beyond their useful life. All other energy efficiency measures other than those in phased implementation shall be executed prior to compliance in order to qualify for conditional compliance. So we kind of went over these in the last slide, but I'm going to go into a little more detail about phased implementation and Conditional compliance. So phased implementation is the allowance for delay in implementation of an identified cost-effective energy efficiency measure identified by the ASHRAE Level 2 audit, energy audit, when the systems or equipment have not reached the end of their useful life through conditional compliance. However, the scheduled replacement shall be accounted for in the life cycle cost analysis and the energy management plan. And phased implementation requires annual reporting as well as documentation for the scheduled replacement. Conditional compliance. If you cannot verify and measure before the date of compliance, phased implementation is a methodology that can allow for more time for measurement and verification. The energy management plan, the operations and maintenance program, and all other efficiency measures must be implemented prior to the compliance date to qualify for conditional compliance, which must be applied for 180 days prior to the compliance date for your building type. Measurement and verification. The next step is measurement and verification, which must be completed by the compliance date. As we covered in the last slide, if they cannot be performed prior to compliance or phased implementation is utilized, you must apply for conditional compliance. In order to show compliance with the investment criteria performance metric, measurement and verification must be completed. In order to show the compliance, the qualified energy auditor or qualified person must verify that data demonstrates that 75% of projected savings of the audit have been realized for 12 consecutive months for buildings that do not meet the energy use intensity target, or the methods of the International Performance Measurement and Verification Protocol, concepts and options for determining energy and water savings, Volume 1, options A through D, have been implemented for buildings without a measurable energy use intensity. So, regardless of which path you decide to pursue, if the building is not exempt, developing and implementing an operations and maintenance program is mandatory requirement of the standard. The operations and maintenance program requirements can be found in Section 6, Normative Annex L of the standard, and shall include tasks that minimize failures and maintain energy consumption efficiency for the building systems listed on this slide. So the envelope, domestic hot water, HVAC, refrigeration, lighting, controls, on-site power generation. And the O&M program shall be implemented at least 12 months prior to mandatory compliance. And again, you can see Section 6, Normative Annex L for more details. So an operations and maintenance program and energy management plan developed in accordance with the standard are required for all non-exempt buildings. It's intended to improve building operation and efficiency without significant costs. It's recommended that this program be developed and implemented as soon as possible. A successfully implemented O&M program could lower the building's EUI significantly enough to meet the EUIT without capital improvement costs. The energy management plan is also a mandatory requirement of this standard. So listed on this slide, you can see a summary of the requirements for the energy management plan, including the energy accounting system, the O&M plan that we just talked about, the energy audit reports, training plan, and so on. And you can reference Section 5 of the standard covering the energy management plan in more detail. All right, so we have another check on learning. Which performance metric requires the development and implementation of an operations and maintenance plan and energy management plan? You can just type your answers in the chat. Annalyn, if you don't mind.
I'm on it.
Thank you, ma'am.
A little silent. Oh, it's both. Someone said both.
Okay,
What is both though?
I was reading between the lines a little bit there, but I won't give it away. We got any more?
How about you give some options?
All right, well, we have the one that we're covering today. We have exemption, meeting the EUIT.
We've got investment criteria and EUIT.
Okay.
There's someone wrote in conditional compliance as well, all of them. So what's the answer? Oh, there you go.
Yeah, everyone is correct so far, so all pathways other than exemption. Good job, everybody's paying attention. Okay, so we covered a lot. I want to kind of recap everything that is required for pursuing the investment criteria. So if the building is not eligible for exemption, the building has no measurable EUI or EUIT, or the EUIT cannot be met through cost-effective measures, the alternative compliance path is through the investment criteria. And in order to do that, you need to have an ASHRAE level 2 energy audit, which identifies energy efficiency measures and must be completed by a qualified energy auditor. The life cycle cost analysis must be completed in accordance with Annex X. All energy efficiency measures deemed to be cost effective by this process shall be implemented. We also need to have measurement and verification completed in accordance with the standard, or apply for conditional compliance if measurement and verification is not completed by the compliance date. And just a note that whether you're trying to meet the EUIT or pursuing investment criteria, conditional compliance is an option that, when approved by Commerce, can extend the measurement and verification process beyond the compliance date, but you must apply for conditional compliance 180 days out before your scheduled compliance date. So whether you're complying through meeting the EUIT or the investment criteria, the operations and maintenance plan and energy management plan must be developed. And the O&M plan requirements must be implemented 12 months prior to the compliance deadline. And each compliance path is good for one cycle and must be resubmitted every 5 years. So here's some of the documents that we talked about. Form A, so that's used to communicate buildings compliance or conditional compliance reporting, identifies the qualified person, documents the energy use intensity and energy use intensity target, requires uploading the energy management plan and operations and maintenance program, and it was produced by Commerce and needs to be uploaded to the Clean Buildings portal. Form B identifies the building activity type and energy use intensity target and is filled out on the Clean Buildings portal. Form C, if you can measure your energy use intensity, documents those calculations and is a Washington specific report within Energy Star Portfolio Manager. Form D summarizes energy audits, Washington state specific report within the audit template form of the United States Department of Energy asset score tool. And then Form F is the life cycle cost analysis tool developed from the Office of Financial Management with amendments unique to the standard and also need to be uploaded to the Clean Buildings portal. So here listed is just some of the generic resources. Obviously our website has a wealth of information. If you're signed up for the bulletin and you get the updates, if not, please do that through the website. We have a fantastic document library, and there are several other web series similar to the one today on the recordings. You can also utilize Commerce's customer support, your utility provider, and the Smart Building Center. And again, along with this recording that we'll send out to the people that registered today, we'll also send out some of the specific links that we referenced. Now, everyone's favorite part, questions and answers. So I'm gonna let Annalyn go through some of the ones that we were already emailed beforehand, and then whatever was listed in the chat, and I'll call on Luke to help us out, our technical lead, please.
Great, thanks, Brittany. All right, these questions, like Brittany said, were submitted upon registration, so I'm just going to go through them. So who monitors compliance?
Annalyn, I'll take these questions if you can read them. Commerce is responsible for review and documentation submitted for compliance with the standard.
Okay, thanks, Luke. Next question, who does inspections?
Well, like I said, Commerce will review compliance. However, the details of this protocol has not been developed yet, so more to come on that.
Thanks, Luke. What are the fees, if there's any?
Well, there are no fees for submittal of compliance documentation, at least no fees to Department of Commerce or the state.
Great, thanks.
I hope that answers that question.
Yes. What are the fines if out of compliance?
Right, yeah, so these are fines and not fees, but if you're out of compliance by the compliance state, the penalties will vary depending on the number of days out of compliance. But the maximum fine works out to be $1.50 per square foot plus a $5,000 base fee.
Great, thanks, Luke. Next one, how does this affect private schools?
So the standard applies to all public and private tier 1 buildings. So if it's over 50,000 square feet, whether it's public or private, it is subject to the standard.
Great, thank you. Next one, are there any nonprofit exemptions?
There are no specific exemptions for nonprofits. You can look at the list of exemptions in Z 4.1. There may be an applicable exemption depending on the building use, the occupancy level, and there are financial hardship exemptions as well.
Great, thanks, Luke. And to add to that, the exemption application is not yet available. We will email out a link to get on the contact list so you'll be alerted as soon as the application is available. The application will be available on the Clean Buildings portal. Next question, what metrics are used to define clean?
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily a definition for clean buildings. It's the title of the legislation and the law. But we use, compliance with the standards based on energy performance of the building. So the two metrics used for the standard are the EUI relative to the target. So if your EUI is less than or equal to the target for the building, that is meeting the standard, and we can define that as being clean. Or the investment criteria pathway, which Brittany walked us through today.
Great, thanks, Luke. Next, are there grants for improvements?
So there are Brittany mentioned the early adopter incentive program, which offers to eligible applicants 85 cents per square foot towards compliance. That is paid out after measurement and verification that the standard has been met, and that incentive is only available for those pursuing the energy use intensity target. So if your EUI meets the target and you have applied and granted eligibility for the incentive, then it would apply to you. Again, that's 85 cents per square foot. There are various utility incentives and rebates, and there may be other federally funded incentives and rebates that can help go towards energy efficiency improvements to the building. Anlin, do we have specific resources on our website that may help lead people towards the various incentive rebates and tax credits available?
Yes, if you go to our website and you go under support and resources, there you'll have a subtopic of it's financing, right? And there you'll see, well, not just there, but you'll see a list of clean buildings programs that support clean buildings program support. It's a bunch of links to accelerator programs and some incentive programs outside of what Commerce provides. There's also grants that Commerce offers as well. And then if you go to financing, you'll see, I would check out what's called DSIRE. It gives you kind of a directory based on the zip code you enter, just a list of energy efficiency incentives and policies out there in your local area.
Thanks, Annalyn, and thanks for mentioning the utility Clean Buildings Accelerator programs. Many of the utilities in the state have what they're terming Clean Buildings Accelerator program, and they provide services to help building owners pursue compliance.
And if one of my colleagues can put the building electrification grant link in the link, that's also a new grant that's come out. I'm not sure if the program manager attended today, but we'll provide you with the website so you can learn more about it. Funding is available. Okay, next question. Can you talk about conditional compliance with investment criteria? Also talk about additional requirements for phase implementation.
Okay, yeah, so Brittany did a great job discussing this in the slideshow today, but I will reiterate it because there is a lot of nuances to it. So just to be clear, phased implementation is a, lack of a better word, a condition of conditional compliance. So in order to do phased implementation, you must be granted conditional compliance. So that means that all cost-effective energy efficiency measures identified by the life cycle cost analysis must be implemented prior to the compliance date, except for any cost-effective energy efficiency measures that have not reached the end of their useful life. They can be placed into phased implementation. So let's say you have phased implementation for a boiler that still has a good 7 years left in its useful life. You can delay that implementation till the next cycle. However, you stay in what's called conditional compliance for the duration until that last delayed energy efficiency measure is implemented. With that, there are requirements for reporting to Commerce annually, and then final completion reporting once all the phased implementation is implemented.
Thanks, Luke. I believe I put in the chat, it's a document we have on conditional compliance. It just gives you a little bit more direction on where to find it in the standard. So check that out. Let me go. We have one more question that was submitted previously, and then we'll jump to the chat. Also, Annika entered that link to that building electrification grant. Thanks, Annika. So Next question. I'm setting up an Energy Star portfolio manager for my hotel. Question. How many years back do I need to enter the data for? Is there an easier way to enter the past data besides manually entering all the numbers?
Okay, so yeah, weather normalized EUI shall be derived, or the EUI, the portfolio manager account will derive EUI, and then from that, they will further reduce it to a weather normalized EUI, which takes into account a normalization of the weather for a year. We may have more extreme weather one year to the next, so we kind of want to equalize these years out using TMY information. So the Energy Star portfolio manager account will do all this automatically. However, you need to set up the account appropriately, and part of that is inputting all of the energy data for the building. So if it's gas and electric, you would include all metered energy for that building. The utilities in the state, if there are over 25,000 customers, are required to upload the energy data for your building automatically. You need to set up the portfolio manager account appropriately with the appropriate account numbers and communicate in the program what utility you have. If your utility is serving less than 25,000 customers, they are not required to automatically upload the data, but they are required to supply that data to you in the form of an Excel spreadsheet, which Portfolio Manager has a template that many utilities will provide that information in the same format in order to upload manually on your end to Portfolio Manager account. If the data is not provided by the utility in that correct format, Portfolio Manager has a template that you can use to do so. And that may save you some time from manually entering in your utility data month by month. So the EUI and weather normalized EUI is derived from 12 consecutive months of energy data. And for the Clean Buildings Performance Standard, that data must come from within the last 2 years of the compliance date.
Can I add a little bit more to that, Luke?
Mm-hmm.
So within Portfolio Manager, if you log into your account and you go to your profile, within the Energy tab on your building's profile, you'll find that there's a simple spreadsheet that you can download. And from there, you can input your utility usage data. That is also the form that you can request your utility to provide you the data with. And we do have resources on our web page that review how to connect with your utility. If you need any additional resources, we can always email them to you, but Portfolio Manager does provide a step-by-step instruction for how to connect your utility to your building's profile.
Those were some very helpful details. Thank you, Annika.
Great, thank you both. So going to the chat, there was one that was entered earlier. They missed what Brittany said about the data centers. So the question is, do all of them not have targets?
Yeah, so I entered an answer within the chat, and I will just read from that just so I'm consistent here. So there is no EUIT for a data center. So if the building does not qualify for any of the exemptions to section 7.2.3, then the whole building would need to comply with through the investment criteria. So section 7.2 identifies how to develop a target for a building. So this may be a single target from the table 7-2A if it's a single activity building. If it's a multi-use building, there are some specific exemptions for building activities without targets, and data centers is a building activity without a target. So one of the exemptions is if your data center or the non-target building activity is less than 10% of the total gross floor area of the building, and that building activity is submetered, then you can just create a target for the remainder of the building that does have a target. However, and then you can back out the GFA, gross floor area, and the energy use of that non-target area if it is submetered. If it is not submetered, then the whole building needs to comply via the investment criteria. With that exemption, you also need to apply the O&M and EMP, the Operations and Maintenance Program, and the Energy Management Plan to that non-targeted space as well as the targeted building. There's also an exemption there where if that non-target space comprises of 10 to 50% of the building's GFA, then and that area is submetered, you can back out the energy use and the GFA from the building's EUI and develop a target just for the remaining space. However, in those cases where it's 10 to 50% non-target, those non-targeted space need to comply with the investment criteria, whereas the rest of the building that has a target can comply with the EUIT if they desire.
Great, thanks, Luke. We'll move on to the next one. For buildings sharing one utility meter, but has an individual internal meter, is the EUI path still possible?
It is. If a building can meet the requirements of section 5.2, which is the metering requirements for the standard, then they can develop an EUI and pursue the energy use intensity target performance path of the standard. So that could be, there could be maybe a district heating and cooling system or a master meter that serves multiple buildings. If you sub-meter down to the covered commercial building level, and you can get measured energy data, so net energy for the covered commercial building or the tier 1 building, independent of any master meters or district system, then you can pursue the target EUI. You just need to make sure that that building can measure net energy, which is all energy imported into the building minus any energy exported. So that could be a renewable such as solar.
Great, thanks, Luke. Let's move on to the next one. Please review slide, who is qualified to conduct ASHRAE level 2 energy audit. Brittany, do you want to flip back to that slide?
Yeah, if anybody's prone to vertigo, close your eyes real quick.
So I know it's a lot of information. Again, these slides will be sent out so that you could review it in detail.
There we go.
Yeah, so as you can see, a person having training expertise and 3 years professional experience in building energy use analysis, any of the following. That would be a licensed professional architect or engineer in the jurisdiction where the project is located. A person with building operator certification level 2 training, that's through the Northwest Energy Efficiency Council. A certified commissioning professional, a qualified energy auditor, a certified energy manager, in current standing certified by the Association of Energy Engineers, an energy management professional certified by the Energy Management Association.
I also entered a link to a document that kind of goes over not just the qualifications and responsibilities for a qualified energy auditor, but all the different roles that may be involved with compliance. So you can review that, and if you have any questions, please let us know. So let's move on to the next question. So I work at a data center. It's my understanding that all data centers need to demonstrate compliance through the investment criteria. Is this correct?
Yeah, if the data center, so again, the data center is a building or an building activity without a target. So if that data center comprises of 50% or more of that building, then the whole building needs to pursue the investment criteria. If the data center is independently metered from the rest of the building, and it comprises of 10 to 50% of the GFA, then the data center needs to meet with the investment criteria, but the rest of the building can choose to comply through the EY target. And then lastly, if the data center comprises of less than 10% of the GFA and is sub-metered, then it can, its energy use and gross floor area can be deducted from the building's EUI development. And the building can comply through the EUIT or the investment criteria just using the GFA of the building activities that are not non-targeted or not a data center. The O&M program and the energy management plan for that building must be applied to the data center as well, but the performance metric is not required for that data center when it's sub-metered and it's less than 10% of the total GFA of the building.
Great, thanks, Luke. If you have, if you know your question wasn't clearly answered and you would like to give us a better understanding of your building situation with the data center, feel free to email us at buildings@commerce.wa.gov, and we'll probably have a better answer for you, and you can have a better understanding on which direction to go about for compliance.
Hey, Annalyn, I wanted to bring
yes.
some attention back to this slide. I know Christopher Eichhorst, thanks for that question, because he did identify an error in our presentation here. This qualified energy auditor slide is actually identifying the qualified person. So this is actually the description of the qualified person. I apologize for us getting this slide incorrect, but obviously if you look at the fourth bullet here, it said the qualified energy auditor could be a qualified energy auditor. So there's a clue into the fact that we got these incorrect. The qualified energy auditor per the standard is the person acting as the auditor of record, having training, expertise, and 3 years of professional experience in building energy auditing, and one of the following. So here's where it's different. A licensed professional architect or engineer, or an energy auditor, assessor, analyst, certified by ASHRAE, or the Association of Energy Engineers for all building types. So we will correct this slide when we finalize this and send this out to the participants.
Yes, thank you so much, because I think it's flip-flopped also in the document that I entered in the chat. So we'll get that fixed. Thank you so much. Good eye. Really appreciate it.
Apologies.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. We'll get that fixed as soon as possible. So next question, if you're clear with that, we'll enter what Luke just stated about the qualified energy auditor in the chat shortly. the next question is, where can we learn more about the requirements for Tier 2 legislation? I'm going to put something in the chat and I'll take this. So Tier 2 rulemaking will begin sometime in the first quarter of December, of 2023 rather. Rules for Tier 2 buildings require and benchmarking, energy management plan, operations and maintenance. Those are required, but we need to create rules for them, and rules are required to be completed by December 2023. So therefore, we're going to start rulemaking shortly. Please subscribe to our bulletin, and that's where you'll get information about the upcoming events. So let's move on to the next question. So the yearly reporting is only for that conditional compliance case.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the question?
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yearly reporting, is that only for conditional compliance?
Yes, so general compliance will, involve submitting of the appropriate forms, depending on your path. If you meet general compliance, full compliance by the compliance date, there's no more reporting required until the next cycle, so 5 years later. However, if you apply for conditional compliance so that you have more time to measure and verify compliance with the standard, then you do need to report annually until compliance is met. And again, if you've got phased implementation as part of your conditional compliance, that phased implementation, you're not going to be able to fully comply with the standard until that delayed measure is implemented. So that could be a year through the next cycle. And what would happen is you would have to reapply the next cycle for conditional compliance, including that phased implementation that you had for the previous cycle. And then whenever that last delayed measure is implemented and you can measure and verify compliance with the standard, you would submit for final reporting then.
Great, thanks, Luke. Next question. Did you say that early adopter incentive is only available for those businesses seeking compliance through the energy use intensity target? Investment criteria compliance can't apply for the early adopter incentive?
Correct, yeah, the way the legislation was written for the early adopter incentive program, it was for compliance through the energy use intensity target metric. So yes, if the building is not pursuing and cannot meet the target, it cannot be eligible for the early adopter incentive.
Another eligibility with the incentive program is the building must be 15 energy use intensity above its target in order to apply. I did put into the chat the link to the incentive program for details about the program, and the guidebook is also located there.
Great, thanks, Monica. Thanks, Luke. Next question, how is measure life defined that is used in the simple payback calculation?
So measure life is not defined within the standard. It's based on common engineering practices. So the qualified energy auditor or the qualified person can identify what the measure life is. ASHRAE has a table of what they suggest as normal measure life. However, there may be systems that have not reached that identified measure life within that table because they've been poorly maintained or have had some mechanical failures. So that measure life may be less than what's in that ASHRAE table or common engineering practice or understanding. Or it could also be extended if that system was well maintained over the years and has had no major issues. So that is up to the qualified person to identify.
Great, thanks, Luke. Next question, how does the clean buildings legislation reconcile the funding question with regards to RCW 43.135.060, prohibition of new or extended programs without reimbursement, transfer of programs, determination of costs? I'm not very familiar with that RCW. Luke, are you familiar with that RCW? We may have to get back to.
Yeah, I am not at all. It's a good question.
Yeah.
Steve will have to get back to you on that. And we'll include that in the Q&A that we send out to participants, documents, the Q&A of this presentation.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that, Steve.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to Stephen Krause's message or his question. How is measure life defined that is used in the simple payback calculation? So I answered that question when it comes to the life cycle cost analysis of existing equipment systems. However, I think Steve is actually asking, his question is more specific to when pre-screening energy efficiency measures identified by the energy audit. There is an allowance to determine whether the measure will pay for itself within its useful life. When it comes to a measure that is not currently installed, yeah, you would evaluate the measure life by common engineering practices. So that ASHRAE table is an example.
Great, thanks, Luke. Next question, does BEAP, BEAP, and I believe it stands for Building Energy Assessment Professional Certification. Let me go back to the question. From ASHRAE qualify as an energy auditor?
Yeah, good question, Chad. You know, when we developed the rules, we weren't specific to the acronyms used for the different organizations that certify energy auditors, but BEAP is the certification that ASHRAE provides that is in accordance with the definition of qualified energy auditor in our standard.
Great, thanks, Luke. I also entered in the chat what it says in the standard about also what you covered on the qualifications for an energy auditor based on the standard. So next question, sorry. Isn't that a qualified person and not a qualified energy auditor under the law? I'm not sure what that.
Yeah, that was just goes back to the
mistake that
concern I already identified.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I hope we answered that question for you.
Okay. Again, I apologize for that mistake, and we'll get that fixed as soon as possible. Next question: are there any fines for conditional compliance?
Yeah, when you're granted conditional compliance prior to the compliance date, there are no fines. You can be granted what we call there's a mitigation plan, which is essentially conditional compliant. It can lead to conditional compliance. So if you don't meet conditional compliance or full compliance with the standard by the compliance date, You can still reach out to Commerce and develop a mitigation plan, which essentially says, we'll only fine you up to the day that you install all these energy efficiency measures or meet the target, and have your operations and maintenance program implemented. And again, conditional compliance can last for a full cycle and you would not get fined during the whole period.
Thanks, Luke. Next question. Are there any applicable fines computed once per year or once per cycle?
It'll be once per cycle. It's, the way it's worded in the standard can lead to think that that you can be fined on an annual basis. It's likely, so there's a maximum of 18 months worth of fines available. And that's kind of why I cut to the chase and gave you the $1.50 per square foot fine number. It will be assessed at that point for a maximum fine of 18 months worth, which is that $1.50 per square foot plus the $5,000 base fee.
Okay. I'm just going to give it another minute to see if anybody else had any questions or needed us to clarify based on the answer we gave to any of the questions. And if we have nothing coming in, we'll just wrap it up. Again, these questions and answers, we're going to put in a document and we're going to send it out to those that registered. This recording will be available and it will be under the support and resources under training videos. And a link will also be shared with you. And you'll also receive the links to the various tools and resources that we discussed today. And like we said, if certain buildings have certain situations and configurations, and you might be confused on the approach on compliance, feel free to email us at buildings@commerce.wa.gov. So far we have no questions. Brittany, did you want to wrap it up?
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, I can't see the chat. I appreciate you monitoring that. Yeah, so I really want to give a special thanks to the team, Luke, Annalyn, and Annika. Thanks for helping everything run so smoothly. Thank you for everyone that attended and submitted these great questions. As Annalyn said, we will get these copied down on a document for you, as well as answer any lingering questions that you may have. You can see our website.